Alright, so I'm making this video because in class I saw that generally people had the same two issues of getting their motion to look smooth and natural. People's motion are looking still a little bit choppy, you know, it's taking weird paths from A to B and it's not smooth in its velocity, which is totally normal. This is your very first time doing motion graphics. I'm not expecting um, anything better than, you know, your first time. So it's going to look bad right now. Um, don't worry about it. Bit by bit, we'll make it look better and better. But the two things that I saw that can help most people are how to manipulate paths and, of course, how to manipulate velocity with the graph editor. So I'm going to go over those two things. First, I'm going to go over paths, then I'm going to go over the graph editor in this video. Hopefully, it can clear things up a little bit and make you feel a little more confident, a little more comfortable moving forward. So let's get into it right here. Okay. Bum, bum, bum. Okay. Maximized out. Let me X these because I don't need those. Oh dear, now I got the spinning beach ball. Okay, cool. So I have here a composition 1080 by 1080, and I'm going to simply add in a square, right? Hold shift to make it actually a square. And I am going to hold command, double click the anchor point button, and then click V to get back to my selection tool. And okay, my anchor point is centered here. So now I want to animate the position of this square. To do that, select your thing, hit P, hit the position stopwatch, and then at, let's see, I'm going to go to 2 seconds. I am going to move this guy to right here. So now our animation looks like this. Okay. And then I think I will say I like that. I'm going to go to this keyframe, hit N to move my working area, the end of my working area, hit N, and this will play on a loop. Now, let's say that I wanted this, instead of just to go simply from left to right, I wanted it to go in like a rainbow, kind of an arching shape. Um, my inclination might be to, here at 1 second in between when it's in the middle, just click it and drag it up, right? Then when I play it, what do I have? Okay, it's not a bad, you know, it's up and down. It's not really rainbow shaped. It's more of like a steep thing. So in order to fix that, maybe I go halfway in between again and I drag this out, move my playhead to halfway again and drag it out again. Okay, and then let's see how that looks. Okay, it's more rainbowy, but it's stuttery and it's the speed changes here and there. It's just kind of weird and unnatural. So I'm going to show you a better, more effective way to do it. Instead, I'm going to delete all these middle keyframes and bring us back to where we were here. A to B in a straight line. So instead of adding points and doing this and that, if you have your object selected and you have position selected, you'll notice that you have, sticking out of the 2 points, A and point B, these little Bezier handles. They're subtle and they kind of blend in with all the other dots, but you can grab these handles and manipulate them just like you're using the pen tool. So I'm going to do this right here, and now I have a pretty smooth arch. Like, well, it's nice, much, much better than trying to add different, 5 points to get your arch. And now let's say I like this so much, I want to see it come back the other way, and I want it to be a looping motion. naturally, I'm going to select this first point, Command C to copy, and go here, Command V to paste. Now you'll notice something happens. It doesn't just follow the same exact path. The software automatically will try and complete the path in a logical way, which in this instance is not what we want. Although it looks fairly smooth, it's not quite what we want. So what we can do is, just like we're using the pen tool, we can manipulate these handles. Now, if you simply try and click and drag the handle, it's going to move both sides of the loop. But like the pen tool, if you hold Option, then when you click and drag, it will be independent of the other handle. But I want to match this up exactly. How can I do that? I mean, I could Option click and then just try and manipulate it as best I could to match. Okay, pretty good. Another method, let me undo a couple, is if you have all of your anchor points selected, all of your path handles will show up, and then that way you can simply match the handles up, right? Holding Alt and moving those. All right, so now when we play our loop, smooth there, smooth coming back, right? And so that is path manipulation. For whatever reason, if your path is not showing up on After Effects, it's important to have this button here selected, Toggle Mask and Shape Path Visibility, right? Without it, you ain't gonna have a path lit up, and you ain't gonna be this or that. For some reason on my computer, it is showing it even when it's not highlighted and selected, but chances are on your device, if you're not seeing the path, it is because this Toggle Mask and Path Visibility is not selected. Awesome. So, boom, that is path manipulation. Now I am going to get into graph editors, right? Okay. So for that, I am just going to real quick create a new composition. Okay. I'm going to add my same solid, and then I am going to add in we'll do a long, skinny rectangle. I'm going to align it to the center. I'm going to Command double click so that my anchor point is aligned, and then I'm going back to my pen tool. And for this, instead of position, I will show you rotation. So with my shape selected, I'll hit R, and I will hit the keyframe next to rotation so that we can start to manipulate the animation. So right here at 1 second, we have our guy, and then at 2 seconds, I am going to rotate it 180 degrees. This first number on rotation is the amount of full rotations, so I'm going to want to leave that alone. And the second number is the degrees, so I'll hit 180. And then we see here, okay, we have a rotating plank. You know, and just for kicks, I am going to go to 4 seconds and give it 1 full rotation. Wow. Okay, awesome. If I wanted it to spin the other way, I would do -1 on the rotation as a side note. So I have 1 rotation here, and if I click N to define my working area, okay, let's see the loop. It's beautiful. However, the motion is constant, right? There's no change in velocity. It's spinning at the same speed always. In order to change that, in this animation, it looks all right. It doesn't look bad. But in order to change that, we are going to play with the graph editor. So in the graph editor, you want to select the keyframes that you want to manipulate in the graph editor. Make sure they're highlighted. So I have my 2 keyframes here, right? This first one is 0 rotations. This is 1 full rotation. And then I click into the graph editor. Now you might see something like this, or you might see something like this. For now, we will go edit value graph. So in this little button right here next to the eyeball, click it and do edit value graph. Now the second thing you're going to want to do is hit this fit graph to view. And that just makes it so you have a nice, it fills the space, you can work with it. You're not like milking a mouse here in a tiny little corner. And then when I'm working with the graph editor too, I also like to maximize the screen that I'm working with. So, okay, to understand the graph editor, as this playhead moves forward, pay attention to what is happening to the shape, right, as pertaining to its rotation. So, I'm holding command, I'm hitting my arrow keys, and you can see that as time moves forward, my playhead is moving to the right. And that is because if we have this graph down here on an X and Y axis, the X axis is going left to right, that represents time. So as my playhead moves from left to right, that represents the time that's passing in my animation. So the other thing that we need to worry about is the Y, the up and down axis. If the x-axis represents time, it's easy to understand because as my playhead moves forward, it's moving along the x-axis. The y-axis represents the animation, right? In this case, we're dealing with rotation, so this y-axis, up and down, this line illustrates up and down the degrees of rotation. You can see here on the left side of the graph, we have 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, and then finally 360, which is a full rotation here at the end. And we can understand by this graph that at an even clip, right, it is going to move along. So in 4 seconds, it will do 360 degrees, 1 full rotation. And we can tell because this line is a straight line, right? It's moving at a constant speed upwards to hit that 360 degrees that we defined. So, now that we understand that, hopefully, if not, no stress. We'll explain it later if you need again. So, now that we know that as we move left to right, that represents time, and up and down represents the value of animation, in this case rotation, we can manipulate this line and understand visually the speed at which our object is being animated. So, we can manipulate this line the same way we do everything with Bezier curves. There's a couple ways to add handles to the line. You can highlight it and then use these buttons here. You can see it's just a visual picture of a little handle coming out of the right side of a point, and then I'll select this point and click the handle. Again, I'll go back to fit in view. So now, catch a breath. Now we can see that the line is not straight. We can see that from 0 frames to 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, there's almost no change in motion whatsoever. And if I go forward 4 more frames, you can see the line starts to rise. 4 more, it starts to rise a little bit more. We can understand by this that our motion will start slow, right? It's barely rising for 12 frames, half a second. It's barely moved at all. So it's going to start slow, right? It will ease out of the keyframe, ease out of it. And then once it gets to this middle section, it's pretty constant velocity, right? And then as we come towards the end, again, this motion slows down a lot until it comes to a resting point. So I'm just going to let this play a couple times. As this object is rotating, pay attention to where it corresponds to this line, as well as what's actually happening with the rotation. All right, starts slow, pretty even speed, and then ends slow. I'll make this even more extreme. So let's say, for the sake of my animation, I wanted it to really start slow, 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 and then speed up, and then really slow into its resting position. I can manipulate these points here. So, all right, these are very extreme now. So what do you think is going to happen, right? It's going to start so slow, imperceptible almost. See, I'm here half a second, it's barely moved at all. And it will barely move, and then all of a sudden it'll speed up real fast. Right here, between these frames, look how much degrees are covered, right? It's from about 120 degrees to 250 degrees, very fast. So now pay attention to how this curve, remember the Y up and down represents the animation, and then the X represents the time. So with this curve starting so slow, going so fast, and then moving up so slow again, how it affects this. Slow, 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 fast, slow, slow. All right, oh, we lost our graph, so let me just select my points again, go back to my graph. All right, as I play it, you can see how the graph corresponds with the motion. Starting slow, when it gets to the middle, moves fast. Awesome. And then, just for the sake of things, we can do things the opposite way. Let's say we want it to start really fast and then end really slow. What will that look like? Start really fast and then take a long time to get to the resting position. Slowest rest in the world. See, it's barely moving. If I do this way, let's see, I want this to be down. It's going to start fast and then be almost, no motion in the middle, and then end fast. Right? So, as you're seeing the motion here, the further that this line moves up and down within a certain amount of time, the faster your object is going to animate, be it rotation, be it position, whatever. All right. So, there's one more thing with the graph editor that I didn't cover that I will show you right here. So if I go back to my first composition, right, I have this this animation here. Now, if I open up the graph editor, you might expect to see just like in rotation, one line, a simple line that's static, right? However, let's check it out. So we have our points highlighted, and we go to the graph editor. Okay, it's a mess. Let's fit it in view at least, and it's still a bit of a mess. But we can understand something from this. We can understand what is happening. Our green line here represents our Y axis in our composition, right? This might be a bit confusing because we have our X and Y in our composition, up and down, and we have our X and Y in our graph editor, which is up and down as well. So as we move forward, we can know, just from what we know from the graph editor, that this green line represents the up and down motion, or the Y motion, because it starts in one position, then it peaks right here at the peak of the square, and then it goes back down to its original value, right? So as far as the y-axis is concerned, up and down, this point and this point are the same. So we can tell that this is the y-axis. It peaks, and then it goes back to the same position, and then it peaks again, goes back to the same position. And we can tell that the red line is the x-axis because it simply goes and then peaks when the cube reaches the far right side of the screen, or maybe this is the right side of the screen. I don't know if I'm mirrored. And then it goes back once the cube starts to go back to the left of the screen, right? Now, if we want this motion to be smoother, taking what we know from the exercise we did with rotation, we might select these points, add a Bezier handle, but what happens? Because our Bezier curve is missing. There's no handle. It's a mess. You might separate the x and y and then select your y-axis, and then the handle's there and you can manipulate it. Okay, but what happens is it will mess up your whole line. Ooh, what the heck happened? I just messed up my whole animation. I have no idea how moving one simple point made my thing just wonk out entirely. Okay, now don't panic, you can always undo. What happens with the position animation specifically is you are dealing with x and y, so you're dealing with two values at a time. Rotation, it's just one value, the degree of rotations. Scale, it just is one value, the percentage of size. With position, it's two values, the x and the y. So manipulating one without the other, it will wonk it out and it will be messy. So you might say to yourself, but if I want to just, if I want to, have this animation start slow and then, or start fast and then go slow, or start slow and then go fast, how do I achieve that with the graph editor in position if when I manipulate these points, it just wonks out? So this is how you do it. If your x and y are separated, undo that. We don't want them separated, and this is the button to separate or unseparate them. So we want them together. And then the best way to manage the speed of position, the velocity when it comes to position, is through the speed graph editor. So up until now, we've been working with the value graph editor. Now I'm going to show you the speed graph editor, which is the same basic principle, but a little bit of a different interface. So I'm going to change to speed graph editor. Now what you see here is simply a straight line on the y-axis, which represents, in the speed graph editor, represents speed, as opposed to the value graph editor. It represents value. So why this is a solid straight line is because the speed of this animation, or the velocity, is linear, right? If something has a linear velocity, it's going to be at, it says pixels per second. It's going to be moving at 800 pixels per second constantly, right? So we can understand with the pixels per second on the y-axis how we might manipulate these points. So let's say I want this animation to start very, very slowly, and then once it's in the middle of the arch, move fast, and then go slowly back into the other point. I can select all of these points here, selecting our point A, select our point B, which is right here, and then holding shift to select all these, are point C. Now if I want all of these to be slow, starting or easing out of the position, easing in and out of this position, and then easing into this position, with these points selected, I am going to drag them down the y-axis to somewhere closer to, oh dear, somewhere closer to, I might need to do them individually, somewhere closer to 0 pixels. So let's do that. Drag that to 0. Drag that to 0. I'm holding shift so it doesn't move on the X and Y, or so it doesn't move on the X axis. Holding shift. Okay, so now you can understand by this speed graph, and you can generally tell you're in the speed graph because it'll be a white line, but if you're in position, and it will be green and red. Let's see, speed graph. Okay, so you can see here that it will start slower. It will start here at moving 0 pixels per second. Once we hit 4 frames, it's moving at about 650 pixels per second. Once we hit 1 second here, it's moving at 1,000 pixels per second. And then as time moves forward, as the animation moves forward, it starts to slow down again at 1.5 seconds. Right here, it's 900 frames or pixels per second. Here, we're back down again to about 650. And then here, we're down to 0 pixels per second. So let's see what this looks like. Start slow, go fast. See, it's much more, it almost looks like it's bouncing. It looks much more natural, much more personality. And then, just like the other graph, I'll just take this to the extreme and we can see what's going to happen here. So, I'll really get this going. Okay. So, I suppose I'll leave one this way and one this way so you can understand what's going to happen. It's going to start down here, 0 pixels per second, and then right here it hits 500 pixels per second, so it's going to start really, really, really slow, and then all of a sudden move really fast up here at almost 5,000 pixels per second, and then the speed is going to slow down again. And then this one, oh, it looks like it's going to do the same thing. Start off slow, but then gain speed a lot quicker and be at a pretty constant speed. So let's see how these two different graphs represent the speed of the motion of the position. All right, so seeing the graph in conjunction with the actual animation, you can see starts off really slow, goes fast, goes slow. And this one is more of a constant, situation. So I can make these boys match right here just cuz. All right, with that, now we can see that it's a whole different personality, right? So with those two things, understanding first how to manipulate a path, remember with this arch that we made with just 2 points, and then understanding how to manipulate the graphs, which hopefully you understand a little bit better now. Those two things are the two common things that I think will really help elevate everyone's motion to going from like, it just looks bad and I don't even have the vocabulary to describe why it looks bad, it just does, to something that looks nice, fluid, inviting, gentle, or if you want, we could do the speed graph the opposite. So it starts off very fast. Let's see if I'm holding shift. It starts off fast and ends fast. That'll be exciting. Oh. Just 1 point at a time, Harbor. Don't get excited. Alright. we'll see something that starts fast, way up here at, 4,500 pixels per second. It's going to shoot out fast and then end up going slow here in the middle. And then, let's see. Very exciting. And then if we go back to our value graph, you can see that it's changed here in a very weird way that would be very hard to accomplish, just freehanding that shape of a graph. But if you use the speed editor, it is much easier to manipulate position. So hopefully you found this helpful. Don't fret if not, if it's still over your head, really confusing, or you just need time to master it. This is, my first time teaching this specific course, and we're going to learn how to do it together and really master motion graphics. All right, that's it.